So this is the Sony XV800. Now personally, I like its new mellow sound signature, and this speaker has a built-in optical port which helps make this speaker a little more versatile. Now overall, Sony has taken some steps in the right directions with this speaker, but I still have some critiques. But today we're going to see how the XV800 stacks up to the JBL Partybox 310 and the JBL Partybox 710. We're going on pricing. The XV800 has a retail price of $650, but just knowing Sony, I do expect the speaker to go on sale from time to time. But then there's the Partybox 310, which has a retail price of $550, but it likes to go on sale for around $450 from time to time. And then there's the Partybox 710, which has a retail price of $800, but it likes to go on sale for $700. So that's why I'm doing this two-way versus video instead of just comparing the XV800 to the Partybox 310. Nonetheless, if you want to pick any of these speakers up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, pick up a Big Head approved hat, link down below. We've got trucker hats and snapbacks. By buying a hat, you help the unbiased and unsponsored videos coming, and it also helps us cover more products and produce more versus videos. Thank you to everyone who's already bought a hat, and look out for more designs coming soon. And also, please remember to hit that like button, and let's get subscribed. Now first, let's talk about the design of these speakers. All three of these speakers have mostly plastic bodies, which can be scratch magnets any time that you try to transport these speakers, and they all have a metal grille on the front, which can get dented rather easily. Now all three of these speakers are large box speakers, but the XV800 and 310 weigh in at around 40 pounds, whereas the 710 weighs in at around 62 pounds, and it's just taller and wider. But to make life a little easier, all three of these speakers have built-in wheels. However, the execution of these wheels is very different. The 310 gets it the most right here. First off, the 310 has a retractable handle, which makes rolling the speaker more comfortable, and these wheels are decently sized, so they'll do a decent job while on rough asphalt. But then there's the 710, which has a larger and more rugged wheels, which I love, and I wish the 310 had these same wheels, but the 710 doesn't have that retractable handle, so it's not as comfortable to roll as the 310. And finally, there's the XV800. Now, the XV800 doesn't have a retractable handle, so rolling this speaker can be a little awkward, especially if you're taller. And also, these wheels are very small, so they're better suited for smoother surfaces, because if you try to roll this speaker on rough asphalt, it's going to bounce all over the place. So overall, all three of these speakers are big, but the Partybox 310 is the most portable, the XV800 is fairly portable, and the 710 can sometimes be a two-person job, especially if you're trying to go upstairs with this speaker. Next up, there's the light feature on these speakers. Now, I feel the light feature on the XV800 is okay, and it looks good either at night or indoors, but I just still feel that JBL's light features are more impressive and more dynamic. With the 310, you have these two light rings on the front and built-in strobe lights, whereas with the 710, this light feature is even larger with connected ring lights, strobe lights, stars, and light rails on the side. Overall, Sony's light feature is decent, but JBL's is just on a whole other level. But as always, if you decide to use the light feature on any of these speakers, that is going to take its toll on the battery life. But now let's talk about battery life. The Partybox 710 actually doesn't have a built-in battery. Now, at first glance, a lot of people assume that the 710 has a built-in battery, but it doesn't. You can only use it while it's plugged in. But the 310 does have a built-in battery, and the 310 has an advertised battery life of 18 hours. However, this advertised battery life of 18 hours is with this speaker playing at 50% volume, which is already a really good listening volume. But that's with the light feature turned off, and that's with its bass boost feature turned off as well. But real-world use with the speaker playing at 65% volume, which I feel is a really good listening volume when you're going to use the speaker with friends, and with the light feature turned on and with the bass boost feature turned on as well, it's good for about 7 to 8 hours of playback time. But then there's the XV800, which has an advertised battery life of 25 hours, but this advertised battery life of 25 hours is with this speaker playing at 30% volume, which is a decent listening volume for at-home use, but that's with the mega bass feature turned on, which is good, but that's with the light feature turned off. But real-world use with the speaker playing at 65% volume, which again I feel is a decent listening volume when you're using this speaker with friends, and with the mega bass feature turned on and with the light feature turned on, the XV800 is good for about 10 hours of playback time, which is rather impressive. But just remember, battery life on these larger box speakers really varies depending on how you use them. If you use them at a higher volume, that's going to drain your battery life faster, or if you have them with their light feature turned on, or if you have them with their bass boost feature turned on as well, all of that is going to affect your overall battery life. Now, regarding connectivity, all three of these speakers can be connected to two devices at the same time, so you and a friend can both be a DJ. None of these speakers have any latency issues, so you can use them to watch videos on your phone. But when it comes to audio codecs, JBL's speakers only have support for SBC, whereas the XV800 has support for SBC, AAC, and LDAC, which is Sony's own in-house high-res audio codec. Just keep in mind that if you do want to use LDAC, you do have to be an Android user because iPhones top out at AAC, and if you do decide to use LDAC, that is going to take an additional toll on the battery life. But if you want to, you can always just use a wired connection with any of these speakers because all of these speakers still have an audio jack, but JBL's speakers also have an audio out jack, which is something that the XV800 doesn't have. So with JBL speakers, if you have a spare speaker lying around, regardless of size or brand, you can always daisy chain them to the JBL speaker and get them to play in sync. But something the XV800 does have that JBL speakers don't have is an optical port. So if you want, you can always use your XV800 with your TV as a soundbar. And personally, I do feel that this helps makes the XV800 a little more versatile because if you need a little extra something to watch the game with, the XV800 can come in clutch. But also, all three of these speakers have 2/4-inch inputs, and you can use them with two microphones for karaoke, or you can plug in a guitar. But the main difference here is that with both of JBL's speakers, you can easily adjust the sound of the microphone from the control panel up top, and you can also add an echo if you wanted to. Now, personally, I never really use an echo with my microphone, but I do think it's very handy that you can adjust the sound of your microphone. Whereas with the Sony, you can't adjust the sound of your microphone. The only thing that you can do is add an echo. So if karaoke is very important to you, then all three of these speakers are good options, but with JBL's, you can easily adjust the microphone. But now let's talk about actually listening to music with these speakers. Now both the 310 and 710 have dual front firing woofers with an exhaust port that shoots out the back, and they both have dual front firing tweeters. Whereas the XV800 has a different setup. The XV800 has dual front firing woofers, but its exhaust port shoots out the front, and this thing has a total of 5 tweeters on it. 3 are on the front, and there are 2 on the rear that shoot upwards. Now when the speaker is standing upright, it'll use these 2 tweeters and the 2 on the back, and when it's laying on its side, it'll use these 2 tweeters and the 2 on the back as well. But now we're going to jump into the sound test. Now to make things interesting, we're going to be using the 710 while it's playing at 75% volume while its bass is set to deep. And to keep things fair, we're going to be using the 310 while it's unplugged and playing at max volume, and with its bass also set to deep. And we're also going to be using the XV800 while it's playing at max volume and with this mega bass turned on. But we're also going to be using it while it's unplugged and plugged in.
Don't mind a little ring on my suit. A little bit of anger makes you cute. And we've been watching this show so long, but it feels like everything that we wrote went back into the band we used. Won't take long, even when I'm without you and I'm without you, babe. So listen up and play along. And that's how time flies, like we are living time. Tell me that you're here with me and down for anything. Oh, down for anything. It's fine line, that we keep on walking all night. Tell me that you're here with me and down for anything. Oh, I'm down for anything. Down, 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 yeah, we can keep it. Down, 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 yeah, we can keep it. Down, down, down. Oh, I'm down for anything. Down, 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 yeah, we can keep it. Down, 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 yeah, we can keep it. Ooh, I'm down for anything. Yeah, we can make a mess inside this booth. You're taking me to places old and new. sweetest sound than our favorite song. And it feels like every time that it comes on, we just roll on till the day's done and the lights gone. And it won't take long, even when I'm without you, when I'm without you, babe. Listen up and play along, yeah. And that's how time flies, like we are living time. Tell me that you're here and feeling down for anything. Oh, down for anything. This fine line that we keep on walking all night. Tell me that you're here and feeling down for anything. Oh, I'm down for anything. Down for anything. Down, down, down. We can keep it down, down, down. We can keep it down, down, down. Ooh, I'm down for anything. Down, down, down. We can keep it down, down, down. Covering us over like a wave. Hold on, I can feel it covering us over like a wave. Hold on, I can feel it covering us over like a wave. Oh, hold on, I can feel it covering us over like a wave.
Now first, I want to adjust max volume performance on these speakers. Now obviously, since the 710 is larger than these other two speakers, it's going to get louder and have more bass. But also, since the 710 is a speaker that you have to use while it's plugged in, it's going to be louder and have more bass as well. Because with both the 310 and XV800, these two speakers get decently loud for their size when they're running off of their internal battery. But if you were to use them while they're plugged in, you're going to get a noticeable performance boost out of them. They're going to get louder and they're going to have more bass. Now, I think the 710 is decent for, let's say, 30 to 35 person parties, maybe 40 people, whereas the 310 and XV800 are good for like 20 person parties. So obviously, if you want the most volume and the most bass, you want to go with the 710 here. But when it comes to comparing max volume performance between the 310 and XV800, they're evenly matched. But the 310 does sound a little louder because it has a slightly brighter sound signature to it than the XV800. But when it comes to the actual sound quality of these speakers, both of JBL's speakers have a slightly brighter sound signature to them, so vocals are more pronounced on them than on the XV800. Whereas with the XV800, vocals on the speaker are also fairly pronounced, but not as much as the JBL's. But I think the biggest difference between Sony speaker and JBL speakers is going to be the bass. The bass on the 310 has a lot more physicality to it than the bass found on the XV800. Plus, with the 310, you can always amplify its bass by placing it up against the wall because of its rear firing exhaust port. Whereas with the XV800, its bass is a lot more mellow, less physical, and more on the audible side than JBL's bass. Now the XV800 still has a decent amount of physicality in its bass, partly because its front firing exhaust port shoots towards the ground. But if you're a bass head, the 310 is going to be able to satiate you a little more than the XV800. And then there's the 710, whose bass is just on a whole other level. But also, the thing about JBL speakers is that if you want to crank their bass up even more, you can set their bass boost to rumble, and you can increase the bass on them as well through their customizable EQ. Whereas with the Sony, you're not going to get much more bass out of it even if you were to play around with its EQ. So sound quality wise, I think the Sony is a good option for someone that wants a more mellow sound out of their speaker, but objectively, I am going to have to say that the sound of the 310 is more versatile Because if you want a more mellow sound, it can do that, or if you want more bass, it can also do that. And then there's the 710, which does everything the 310 can, but just beastlier. But finally, let's talk about pairing these speakers up with other speakers. Now, with both of JBL's party boxes, you can wirelessly pair them up to one other party box. So if you have a 310 or a 710, you can wirelessly pair them up with either an Encore, a 110, a 310, or a 710 and get them to play in sync. Or if you have two of the same speakers, you can get them to play in left and right stereo mode. But the most important thing to remember here is that you cannot wirelessly pair your larger party box speakers to any of JBL's smaller speakers that are using Party Boost. So if you have a Boombox 3 or a Boombox 2 or an Extreme 3 or a Charge 5 or a Pulse 5 or a Flip 5 or a Flip 6, then you cannot wirelessly connect them to any of JBL's party boxes. Now personally, I do feel that it is very limiting that you can only wirelessly pair two party boxes together, and I also think that it's very limiting that you can't pair your party boxes to any of JBL's Party Boost speakers. But like I mentioned earlier, the party boxes do have that audio out jack, so you can always daisy chain them to any other speaker if you have a spare audio cable lying around. But then there's the XV800, which is using Sony's Party Connect, and you can wirelessly pair it up to any of Sony's larger box speakers that are also using Party Connect, like let's say an XV900 or an XV800 or an XP700 or an XP500, and you can pair up to 100 speakers together and get them to play in sync. Or if you have two of the same speakers, you can wirelessly pair them up and get them to play in left and right stereo mode. But the cool thing about Sony's Party Connect is that you can pair your larger box speakers to any of Sony's smaller speakers that are also using Party Connect. So if, let's say, you get an XV800, you can wirelessly sync it up to your Sony XG500 or XG300, XE300, XE200, or to an XB43, XB33, or XB23, and again, you can get them to play in sync. Now, even though Sony's Party Connect is very accommodating and it definitely gets the job done, just be warned that sometimes Party Connect can be a bit of a hassle to use. Sometimes it does take a while for all of your speakers to get paired up. Sometimes all of your speakers don't get paired up on the first try, so you're going to have to go through the pairing process multiple times, and sometimes skipping does happen. Now, this doesn't happen all of the time, but this is just a heads up as to what to expect. Whereas with a JBL speaker pairing protocol, even though it is a lot more limiting and you can't pair your larger box speakers to any of JBL's smaller Party Boost speakers, I have found that it is easier to use. Pairing your two speakers together is just easier, it's faster, and skipping isn't as big of an issue. But with all that being said, if we were to compare the Sony XV800 to the JBL Partybox 310, which I feel is the direct comparison here, the Partybox 310 still has the better execution than the Sony XV800. From a portability standpoint, the 310 has that retractable handle and those larger wheels, so rolling it is easier than the XV800. You can also easily adjust the sound of your microphone from the control panel up top. The 310 also has the more impressive live feature, and I feel the audio out jack is a very nice feature to have. And when it comes to sound, I think the sound of the 310 is more versatile, but the XV800 also has its pluses. The XV800 has better performing battery life than the 310. You can also connect the XV800 to your TV and use it as an impromptu soundbar. And with the XV800, you can wirelessly connect it to more speakers and to Sony's smaller speakers as well. And the sound of the XV800 is also good, but this one comes down to a matter of taste. The XV800 offers you a more mellow and smoother bass experience. And finally, there's the 710. Now, obviously, if you want more sound, this is the one to get. But this one is larger, less portable, and it doesn't have a built-in battery. But the 710 is an experience all on its own. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit the like button and get subscribed. If you want to pick any of the products up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch. I made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And you know I can be very particular, so I'll only slap my name on something if I'm really proud of it.